The planet Velora was a place of light and harmony. Floating crystal cities hung above rivers of silver water, and tall towers shimmered under the twin suns. Princess Lyra had always loved the calm beauty of her home. She spent her days walking through the gardens of glowing flowers, painting scenes of the skies, and listening to soft music played on silver harps. She had never cared much for politics or great alliances. To her, life was about art, kindness, and peace. But her father, King Oran, thought differently. He was a ruler who believed in planning for the future. He had guided Velora for many years, and he knew the galaxy was changing. New civilizations were rising, and among them, humans from Earth were becoming strong and influential. One golden evening, as the palace bells rang, King Oran called the royal court together. Lyra sat quietly at his side, her long green robe flowing across the marble floor. She had no idea what her father was planning to announce. She thought perhaps it was about trade or new art festivals. The great hall filled with nobles, scholars, and ambassadors. Everyone waited as King Oran rose from his throne, his deep voice carrying across the chamber. "People of Velora," he said, "a new era is upon us. The galaxy is growing closer, and friendships between worlds are more important than ever. Our neighbors on Earth have proven themselves strong and ambitious. If we join hands with them, we secure peace and prosperity for our people." The court murmured softly, curious about what would follow. Lyra leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "To seal this alliance," King Oran continued, "a bond must be formed between Velora and Earth. And so, I announce that my daughter, Princess Lyra, will marry a representative chosen by the humans, a warrior named Daniel." The words struck Lyra like a sudden storm. She froze in her chair, her heart racing. A marriage? With a human? She had heard many stories of them, fierce, restless beings who pushed into space with fire in their eyes. They were builders and dreamers, yes, but also stubborn and unpredictable. She had never met one before, and now her father wanted her to marry one? Her voice trembled as she whispered, "No, father. Not that human," but the words were too soft to carry beyond the throne. The nobles erupted in applause, their voices echoing in the grand hall. They spoke of a future where Velora would share knowledge with Earth, where the two great worlds would rise together. The ambassadors clapped politely, smiling at the thought of new power and influence. But Lyra's hands shook. She turned to her father, her eyes wide. "Father, why? Why me? I don't even know him." King Oran looked at her kindly, yet firmly. "Because you are my daughter, Lyra. And because this is more than a marriage. It is a bridge between worlds. You will not be alone in this. You will have your people, and perhaps, in time, you will see the strength in this human." Lyra wanted to protest further, but her throat felt dry. The music of the court celebration rose around her, but she heard none of it. All she could think of was the image of a human warrior, strong, fierce, and utterly unlike her gentle world. She excused herself from the hall and walked quickly through the palace corridors, her robe brushing against the glass walls. Outside, the twin suns sank into the horizon, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. Usually, Lyra would stop to admire the view, but not tonight. Her mind was full of fear and questions. What if the human was unkind? What if he looked down on her people? What if he demanded that she leave Velora forever? She hugged her arms around herself as she paced the balcony. Lyra loved her father, but sometimes she felt he saw her more as a piece of his plans than as a daughter with dreams of her own. She wanted to paint, to learn, to live quietly in the beauty of Velora. But now, her future was tied to someone she had never met. That night, as stars began to shine above, she sat by her window and watched the skies. Somewhere out there, far beyond the glowing horizon, Earth spun around its sun. And somewhere on Earth, a human named Daniel was preparing to leave his world for hers. The thought made her heart pound. She whispered softly to herself, I am not ready for this. Not him. Not that human, yet deep inside, though she would not admit it, a small spark of curiosity flickered. Who was this Daniel? Why had the humans chosen him? Was he really as fierce as she feared, or was there something more behind the stories? The question stayed with her as the night deepened. The stars above seemed to whisper promises of change. And though Lyra tried to push the thought away, she knew her life had just stepped into a path she could not turn back from. The day Lyra had been dreading came sooner than she hoped. The palace bells rang again, this time to welcome the human guest. Princess Lyra stood at the top of the wide marble stairs, her heart heavy as she looked at the gathering below. The courtyard was filled with nobles, guards, and curious citizens who had been allowed inside the palace gates to witness the arrival. The air shimmered with banners of gold and green, the colors of Velora, fluttering gently in the breeze. A long silver ship from Earth had landed just beyond the city walls, and now its passengers were making their way toward the palace. Lyra's fingers twisted nervously in the folds of her robe. She told herself she would remain calm, graceful, and distant. This was just duty. Nothing more. The crowd grew louder as a figure stepped forward. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and walked with confidence. His hair was dark, his step steady, and though he wore formal clothes, there was something about him that made him stand apart from the finely dressed nobles. His name was Daniel, the human warrior her father had chosen for her. Lyra's heart thumped. She expected him to look fierce, wild, or even arrogant, like the tales she had heard of humans. Instead, when he reached the foot of the stairs, he stopped, bowed deeply, and raised his eyes to her with calm respect. I thank you for welcoming me to Velora, he said in a voice steady and warm. It is an honor to stand before you. The words surprised her. She had imagined a loud, commanding tone, but instead he spoke carefully, almost humbly. King Oran smiled proudly and stepped forward. People of Velora, he announced, this is Daniel of Earth, the one chosen to form the bond between our worlds. May he be welcomed as one of us. The court clapped politely, though Lyra noticed a few nobles whispering and frowning, uncertain about this human guest. She wished she could vanish from the scene. Instead, she forced herself to step down the stairs, her robe trailing behind her. When she reached Daniel, she gave the smallest nod she could manage, her voice soft. Welcome. Daniel's eyes studied her for a moment, but there was no arrogance in his gaze. Instead, there was patience, as if he understood her unease. Princess, he said gently, I hope to earn your trust, not just your welcome. Lyra blinked. She had not expected such words. She turned quickly away, hiding her expression. The rest of the day passed in ceremonies. The humans presented gifts, shining crystals shaped by Earth's machines, and books filled with images of their planet's seas and mountains. Veloran musicians played songs of harmony, and the nobles offered speeches about unity and future prosperity. Lyra sat beside Daniel at the grand table, but she hardly spoke. She listened to his polite answers to the nobles' endless questions. He spoke of Earth's struggles, of its journey among the stars, and of its hopes for friendship rather than conflict. Each time he spoke, she expected sharpness, but instead found a calm honesty. Yet her heart resisted. She told herself it was all rehearsed, a performance to impress her father and her people. Surely humans could not be so gentle. Surely there was a hidden fierceness waiting to appear. That evening, as the feast ended and the guests began to leave, Daniel approached her. She stiffened but did not step away. Princess, he said softly, I know you did not choose this. I did not either. But I believe we can learn something from each other. If nothing else, let us begin with understanding. Lyra kept her eyes on the floor. Understanding is not so easy, she murmured. He nodded. Then let us take it slowly. One step at a time. For a moment, she almost met his gaze. His words were calm, without pressure, without demand. It unsettled her more than anger would have, because it meant he was not the man she had imagined. That night, Lyra sat in her chamber once again, staring at the stars. Her heart was still troubled, but her thoughts were different now. She remembered the way he bowed, the way he listened, the way he did not force himself into her space. She whispered quietly to herself, "Perhaps he is not what I thought." But then she shook her head quickly. No. Humans are fierce. He is only pretending. Still, deep inside, curiosity stirred. For the first time, she wondered what he truly thought when he looked at Velora's glowing skies. And though she tried to dismiss the thought, she knew tomorrow would bring another meeting, another step on this path she could not escape. The stars above shone brighter, as if watching. And far below them, in the quiet palace halls, both the alien princess and the human warrior lay awake, each wondering what the other truly carried in their heart. The days after Daniel's arrival were filled with endless ceremonies, discussions, and quiet moments of adjustment. Princess Lyra had no choice but to be near him. Her father had assigned her the role of guide, telling her it would help him understand Veloran ways. To Lyra, it felt more like punishment. She would rather spend her days in the quiet gardens than walk beside a human warrior who unsettled her thoughts. Yet Daniel never acted in the way she feared. He did not shout or demand. Instead, he asked questions, too many questions. On the first morning, as they walked through the palace gardens of silver-leafed trees, Daniel stopped to admire the glowing blossoms. "Are these natural, or did your people shape them with your science?" he asked. "They are natural," Lyra answered shortly. "They have grown here for centuries." He smiled, running his fingers lightly near the petals but not touching them. "On Earth, flowers are fragile. But here, even beauty seems strong." Lyra frowned. She had expected him to ignore such details. Why was a warrior so interested in flowers? On another day, she took him to the Hall of Harmony, where great crystal pillars hummed softly with energy. "This hall sings with the voices of our ancestors," she explained. "It is a place of quiet respect." Daniel closed his eyes and listened carefully. "It feels like the air itself carries memory," he said. "Earth has no halls like this. But when we stand by the ocean, the waves have a voice. Perhaps it is something similar." Lyra tilted her head slightly, surprised again. She had wanted him to look confused, to fail to understand. Instead, he compared it gently to something from his own world. Still, she told herself, it meant nothing. Words were easy. Actions were harder. Later, during a meal in the royal dining hall, Lyra tried another test. She offered Daniel a dish prepared in the traditional Veloran way, shimmering fruit that carried a taste most outsiders found overwhelming. She expected him to reject it politely or struggle to hide his discomfort. Instead, Daniel took a bite, paused, and then nodded thoughtfully. "It is strange, but not unpleasant," he said. "It tastes like nothing from Earth, but that makes it worth remembering." Some nobles nearby chuckled quietly at his expression, but he did not seem embarrassed. He simply laughed along with them, light-hearted and calm. Lyra could not understand him. Was he truly this adaptable, or was it all a performance? The real test came when her father invited Daniel to the great festival of unity. It was one of Velora's most treasured traditions, a celebration where music, art, and ceremonial challenges filled the city for an entire day. Outsiders rarely joined the events, but King Oran insisted Daniel should take part. When the festival began, Lyra and Daniel walked side by side through streets lined with glowing lanterns. Alien children ran past, laughing as musicians played soft melodies. Stalls displayed crafts made from crystal and silver, while the air carried the sweet scent of roasted fruits. But the true heart of the festival was the ceremonial trial, a test not of strength, but of patience, creativity, and spirit. Participants had to solve puzzles made of shifting crystal patterns, compose short verses of poetry inspired by their surroundings, and perform small acts that showed respect for nature. Lyra thought surely Daniel would falter here. He was a warrior, not a poet. She waited for him to stumble, to prove that humans did not belong in such traditions. Yet Daniel surprised her again. When faced with the shifting crystal puzzle, he studied it calmly, moving the pieces with care. He did not rush, even when others grew impatient. Finally, the puzzle lit up in his hands, glowing with approval. When asked to compose a verse, he hesitated, then spoke softly, 2 suns above, 1 sky to share, 2 worlds apart, yet meeting here. The crowd murmured in surprise at the simple but heartfelt words. And when it came time to show respect for nature, Daniel bowed low before a tree older than the city itself. On earth, we plant trees for our children, he said. May this one live to see generations of yours. Lyra stood silently, unable to believe what she had seen. This was not a man who dismissed her people's traditions. He embraced them with sincerity. That night, as the festival lights faded and the crowd dispersed, Lyra found herself walking slowly beside Daniel. She had no sharp words left to test him with. Instead, she asked quietly, "Why do you try so hard to follow our ways?" Daniel looked at her with calm eyes. "Because I am not here to change you. I am here to learn. Humans are not just fighters, princess. We build, we dream, we protect. I hope, in time, you will see that." Lyra said nothing. Her pride would not allow her to admit how his words unsettled her heart. But as she returned to the palace, she could not shake the image of him standing beneath the lanterns, speaking poetry with a voice both simple and true. And for the first time, she wondered if her fears had been wrong all along. The festival of unity had ended, but the memory of Daniel's actions lingered in Lyra's mind. She told herself not to think about it, yet the image of him bowing before the ancient tree and speaking poetry in his quiet voice returned again and again. Still, she refused to admit that anything had changed. She reminded herself that he was a human, a warrior, someone from a world of restlessness. Surely, she thought, his calm behavior was only a mask. Her doubts, however, were soon tested. A few days later, King Oran announced a new trial. To honor our guest, he declared in the council hall, Daniel will take part in the trial of balance. This is no ordinary contest. It is a ceremony to test patience, wisdom, and spirit. Only one who respects harmony can succeed. The nobles nodded. They were curious to see how the human would perform. Some of them still doubted Daniel's sincerity. They whispered that humans were clever actors, pretending respect to gain power. Lyra felt the same doubts. Yet deep inside, a small voice whispered that Daniel might surprise them again. She tried to silence that thought, but it remained. On the day of the trial, the great square of Velora filled with citizens. Tall crystal arches glowed faintly, marking the place where the challenges would be held. Lyra stood with her father and the court, watching as Daniel stepped forward. He wore simple clothes, no armor, no weapons. The trial began. The first challenge was a test of endurance. Daniel had to walk across a bridge of shifting crystal panels that moved under his steps. Most people rushed across, trying to finish quickly, but Daniel did not. He moved slowly, carefully, balancing with patience. Each time a panel trembled, he paused, waiting until it steadied before continuing. The crowd watched in silence as he reached the other side calmly, without a single fall. The second challenge tested the mind. A set of glowing orbs floated before him, forming patterns that had to be completed. Many competitors grew frustrated, moving the orbs too quickly and breaking the sequence. Daniel, however, studied the shapes with care. He touched the orbs gently, shifting them one by one until the pattern lit up in harmony. The square filled with soft gasps of admiration. The third and final challenge was one of spirit. Daniel was asked to stand before a mirror of crystal that reflected not only his image but his inner thoughts. Most participants struggled, unsettled by the mirror's glow. Daniel stood calmly. He looked at his reflection and spoke softly, "I see a man who is far from perfect, but who tries to learn. I hope that is enough." The mirror glowed brightly, a sign of acceptance. The crowd erupted in applause. Even the nobles who doubted him exchanged thoughtful looks. King Oran nodded proudly. But the person most shaken was Lyra. She had expected Daniel to stumble, to reveal arrogance or impatience. Instead, he had shown humility, wisdom, and calm strength. That evening, as the court celebrated his success, Lyra found herself standing beside him on the balcony of the palace. The twin suns were setting, painting the skies in soft shades of gold and pink. "You handled the trial well," she said quietly, not meeting his eyes. Daniel smiled gently. "Thank you. But it was not about winning. It was about listening. The crystals, the patterns, even the mirror, they all ask us to listen more than act." Lyra tilted her head slightly. "And humans know how to listen." He chuckled softly. "Not always. But we try. On Earth, strength is often seen in battles or victories. But I have learned that true strength is also patience, kindness, and the courage to stand still when others rush forward." His words lingered in the evening air. For the first time, Lyra did not know what to say. She had always thought of humans as restless, always moving, always fighting. Yet here was one speaking of patience and listening. Daniel turned his gaze to the horizon. "Princess, I do not want a crown, nor do I wish to take your world. I only hope to build a bridge between us. If you cannot trust me yet, that is fine. But I will not stop trying to understand." Lyra felt her heart stir, though her pride kept her silent. She wanted to argue, to remind him of her fears. But instead, she found herself looking at the sky with him, sharing a quiet moment that felt almost peaceful. When she returned to her chamber that night, she sat by her window once more. The stars shimmered above, and for the first time since her father's announcement, she did not whisper words of fear. Instead, she whispered a single thought she could not ignore: "This human is not what I believed." And though she still carried doubt, curiosity had begun to grow stronger than fear. The days after the trial of balance were quieter, but whispers moved through the palace like an invisible wind. Some nobles praised Daniel for his calm strength and humble words. Others, however, were not convinced. At a gathering in the royal hall, Lyra overheard two elder nobles speaking in hushed voices. "The human performs well," one said, "but who can say his heart is true? Perhaps he hides his real nature." "Indeed," the other agreed. "Humans are clever. They smile, but behind their smiles may rest ambition. We must be careful. We cannot risk our peace on a stranger." Their words sank into Lyra's thoughts. She wanted to believe that Daniel was different, but doubt pressed against her heart. What if they were right? What if his patience was only an act, a mask to win her trust? That evening, she sat in the garden, her mind heavy. The glowing flowers that usually brought her peace gave her no comfort. She remembered the way Daniel had spoken with humility during the trial, the way he had bowed before the ancient tree. But what if it was all a performance? Her thoughts were interrupted by laughter. She turned and saw Daniel sitting on the grass, surrounded by a small group of Valoran children. They had gathered around him with wide eyes, listening intently as he showed them a small book from Earth. "This," Daniel said gently, pointing at a picture, "is the sea. It stretches farther than the eye can see. The waves move like music, rising and falling again and again." The children gasped in wonder. "Does it sing like our rivers?" one asked. Daniel smiled. Yes, in its own way. When you stand by the sea, it feels as if the world itself is breathing. He turned the pages, showing them images of forests, mountains, and skies filled with birds. The children's faces glowed with delight. One boy tugged at his sleeve and asked, "Will you take us there one day?" Daniel laughed softly. "Perhaps one day. But for now, I can bring Earth to you in stories." Lyra watched quietly from behind the garden wall. There was no court, no nobles, no audience here. And yet Daniel's voice was warm, his eyes kind. He spoke to the children with patience, answering every question, never dismissing their curiosity. Her heart wavered. Was this truly the behavior of someone pretending? That night, as the twin moons rose above Velora, Lyra found herself walking along the balcony. She expected silence, but Daniel was already there, leaning on the railing, gazing at the stars. He turned when he noticed her. "Couldn't sleep either?" Lyra hesitated, then nodded. "Too many thoughts." Daniel looked back at the sky. "Same for me. Leaving Earth was not easy. I wondered if I would ever belong here. Sometimes I still wonder." She blinked in surprise. "You were afraid?" He chuckled softly. "Of course. Every step here is new to me. Your customs, your people, even your skies. I was afraid I would make mistakes, or worse, offend you without meaning to." Lyra stared at him, uncertain how to respond. She had imagined him confident, unshaken. But here he was, admitting his fears openly. Daniel continued, his voice quiet. "On Earth, people sometimes see me as strong. But strength is not enough. Strength cannot give trust, or friendship. That is why I try to listen here. I want to understand, not command." His words struck something deep within Lyra. For so long, she had imagined him as fierce and unbending. Yet he stood before her as someone uncertain, someone trying to find his place, just as she was. She lowered her gaze. "I thought humans never feared anything. That you only rushed forward without doubt." He smiled. "We fear many things, princess. But fear can teach us. It reminds us what truly matters." For the first time, Lyra felt her walls weaken. She still carried doubt, but alongside it was a growing sense of connection. This human was not what she expected, not what the nobles feared, not even what she had feared. He was something else, something she did not yet understand. When she returned to her chamber that night, she lay awake, her thoughts unsettled. She remembered the whispers of the nobles, the warnings of doubt. But she also remembered the sound of children laughing as Daniel spoke of oceans and mountains. She remembered his quiet confession under the stars. Her heart asked questions she could not answer. Was he truly sincere? Could he be trusted? Or was she letting herself be drawn into a false image? The stars outside her window glowed softly, as if listening. And Princess Lyra, for the first time in her life, felt her heart pulled in two directions, between fear and trust, between doubt and hope. She closed her eyes, whispering into the night, "What am I to do?" The city of Velora had never seen a storm like this before. Dark clouds swirled across the sky, and strong winds rattled the crystal towers. Citizens hurried through the streets, seeking shelter, while palace guards worked to secure fragile structures. Even the gentle rivers of silver water had begun to rise, spilling into the lower gardens. Princess Lyra stood on the palace balcony, her heart pounding. She had never felt such fear for her city before. And she was not alone. Daniel stood beside her, his eyes scanning the horizon calmly. "We need to help," Daniel said. "People are still outside. Some may be trapped." Lyra's stomach twisted. She had expected humans to act with weapons or force. But Daniel did not reach for a sword. Instead, he moved with careful thought, directing the palace guards, organizing citizens, and finding safe paths through the city. "Follow the children here," he instructed a group of guards. "Lead the elders through the left passage. Move slowly, but do not panic." Lyra felt her admiration growing, even as fear gripped her. Daniel was not only brave, he was kind, thoughtful, and patient. He did not act out of recklessness or pride. Every decision he made was meant to protect, to care, to guide. She followed him into the lower gardens, where a group of children clung to their parents, frightened by the rising waters. Daniel knelt beside them, his voice calm. "Stay close together," he said. "Hold hands, and we will move slowly. Nothing will happen if we stay calm." The children obeyed immediately, sensing his confidence. Lyra could not help but notice how naturally the humans responded to him. His courage was not loud or fierce, it was steady and gentle. As the storm grew stronger, some parts of the city began to shake. Crystal panels rattled, and small stones fell from higher towers. Lyra feared the worst. But Daniel moved quickly, but carefully, securing loose panels and helping guards support weaker structures. Even when one of the bridges in the garden threatened to tip, Daniel stayed calm. He instructed everyone to move step by step, balancing themselves carefully. "Patience," he reminded them. "Patience is stronger than rushing." Lyra felt awe mixed with relief. She had always imagined human strength as physical, as fighting or rushing into danger. But Daniel showed her a different kind of strength, one that came from careful thought, calm action, and care for others. By nightfall, the storm began to pass. The wind died down, and the first stars appeared faintly above. Though parts of the city were damaged, no lives were lost. Citizens gathered in the square, whispering their thanks. Many looked at Daniel with wide eyes, surprised and grateful for his presence and leadership. King Oran approached his daughter, pride shining in his eyes. "Do you see now?" he asked gently. "Strength is not only in weapons or force. It can be patience, guidance, and courage to protect others." Lyra nodded slowly, unable to speak at first. Her heart was full of emotions she had not understood before. She thought of the trial, of the way Daniel had listened and moved carefully, and now she saw him in action, saving lives with thought and care. Later, as the city began to recover, Lyra walked beside Daniel through the quiet streets. The storm had left puddles that reflected the glowing towers, making the city appear as if it were floating in the stars. "You were amazing today," Lyra said quietly, almost afraid to break the silence. Daniel smiled, but it was soft, not boastful. "I only did what anyone should do. I could not leave anyone behind." Lyra shook her head. "No. Others might have panicked or acted without thinking. But you guided them. You stayed calm when everyone else was afraid." Daniel glanced at her. "Strength is not always about being the loudest or fastest. Sometimes it is about standing steady when others falter. That is what humans learn from the storms of our world. And from what I see here, Velorans understand that too." For the first time, Lyra felt a quiet warmth for him in her heart. She realized that fear she had felt before was slowly giving way to trust. This human warrior was not a threat. He was a friend, a helper, someone who could stand beside her in the hardest times. As they reached the palace balcony, Lyra looked at the stars above. They twinkled softly, as if celebrating the calm after the storm. She whispered to herself, "Perhaps he is more than I imagined." Daniel followed her gaze, saying quietly, "Princess, whatever comes next, we can face it together. Not as Valoran and human, but as two who care for this world." Lyra smiled faintly, a smile she had not given freely before. Her fear had not disappeared, but it had changed. Now it was mixed with curiosity, admiration, and a growing respect. The night was calm, and the city of Velora began to shine again under the twin moons. And for Princess Lyra, the image of Daniel had changed forever. He was not fierce in the way she feared, he was fierce in his courage, kindness, and unwavering heart. The day of the ceremony arrived. The palace of Velora glowed brighter than ever under the twin suns. Crystal towers reflected the morning light, streets were lined with flowers, and citizens filled the courtyards, eager to witness the historic event. Today, Princess Lyra would meet Daniel not just as a guest, but as her future partner in the bond between two worlds. Lyra stood in her chamber, her green robe shimmering in the soft light. Her hands trembled slightly, though she had come a long way from fear to curiosity, admiration, and trust. Still, the question remained in her heart: was she truly ready to take this step? Daniel arrived quietly, not with pomp or force, but with his gentle calm. He bowed before her, as he always did, and offered a soft smile. "Princess, if your heart is not ready, I will step aside. I do not want this to be forced." Lyra stared at him, surprised. All these days, she had expected him to be proud, commanding, perhaps even impatient. Yet here he was, offering her freedom, showing her respect more than ever before. "No, Daniel," she said, her voice shaking but steady. "It is not that I do not trust you. I have learned much about you, and I see your heart. I choose this not because I have no fear, but because I want to." Daniel's eyes lit up with quiet joy. He extended his hand, and Lyra took it, feeling the warmth and reassurance in his grip. The ceremony began in the grand square. Citizens, nobles, and visitors from Earth gathered to witness the union. Music played softly, a melody of both worlds blending in harmony. Children waved small flags, some Veloran, some Earth colors, celebrating the connection that was more than political, it was personal, human, and heartfelt. King Oran stepped forward, placing his hands on his daughter's shoulders. "Princess Lyra, you have grown in wisdom and courage. You understand that bonds between worlds are more than ceremonies. They are built on trust, respect, and choice. Today, you make that choice freely." Lyra nodded, squeezing Daniel's hand. The two of them stepped forward together, facing the gathered crowd. A great crystal arch shimmered above them, representing the unity of Velora and Earth. As they stood beneath it, Daniel spoke softly to Lyra, "I promise to honor you, your people, and your world. Together, we will learn and grow as equals and friends." Lyra's heart swelled. "And I promise to listen, to understand, and to walk beside you, not because I must, but because I choose to." The officiant, a wise Veloran elder, smiled. "Then let this bond be formed, not by duty alone, but by heart, by respect, and by shared courage." As the words were spoken, a gentle light spread through the arch, bathing the couple in warm colors. The citizens cheered, but it was not the loudness of the celebration that moved Lyra, it was the calm, quiet understanding that she had made the right choice. She looked at Daniel, at the human who had once seemed so fierce, and now seemed so gentle, brave, and kind. After the ceremony, the streets were filled with joy. Children ran past, laughing and holding hands with visitors from Earth. Musicians played songs that mixed Veloran crystal tones with Earth instruments, creating melodies that danced through the air. Lyra and Daniel walked together among the people, listening to their laughter, feeling the warmth of two worlds celebrating together. Later, on the palace balcony, Lyra looked at the horizon. The twin suns were setting, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. Daniel stood beside her, quiet but content. "You were right," Lyra said softly, smiling. "I was afraid at first. I imagined you as something fierce and untouchable. But now I see, strength can be gentle. Courage can be kind. And understanding is the greatest power of all." Daniel smiled back. "And you were brave enough to see it, Princess. Not everyone could do that." For the first time, Lyra felt no fear. Only hope, curiosity, and trust. She realized that this bond was not just a bridge between Velora and Earth, but a bridge between hearts. She had stepped into a new world, not alone, but with someone who respected and valued her. As night fell, the city of Velora sparkled under the twin moons. Crystals reflected the soft light like stars on the ground. Lyra and Daniel stood side by side, looking at the glowing towers, the gentle rivers, and the people they both now cared for. In that moment, Lyra whispered softly, "This is just the beginning." Daniel nodded. "And we will face it together, not as princess and warrior, but as two friends, learning and growing, hand in hand." And so, the human warrior and the alien princess began their journey not as strangers forced into duty, but as partners united by choice, respect, and the courage to understand one another. Two worlds had come together, not through fear, not through power, but through heart. And Velora shone brighter than ever, filled with hope, harmony, and the promise of a shared future.